Hello, welcome to Mad Art. Thanks ever so much for visiting. The purpose of this video is to actually go through a portrait that I did for my students. Now, I specifically chose this portrait for the students to do because of the challenges within it. It was a very, very young face. It wasn't a baby, but it wasn't a boy. It was more like that transition between baby and boy sort of thing, so a little toddler. And his face was very, very angelic and very youthful. He also had a good head of curls, which made it even more of a challenge, so I chose it specifically to try and show my students how difficult it can be to, one, capture the youth in a portrait of a little baby, and also how to get those fine details in hair, especially with curly hair and things. So I'm going to talk you through this video now. I'm going to share with you the challenges I found throughout it and how I overcame them, in the hope that that information will help you when you come to do your portrait paintings. The medium that I used for this piece was acrylics on a stretched canvas. Naturally, when you're using acrylics, the obvious thing with acrylics is that the paint dries quite quickly. Now I personally quite like that, but when you're mixing on your palette it can be a little bit frustrating. So you do have to continuously mix up your colours and remix your colours and find the right colours and things. Now when you're working on a baby face, your tones are extremely important, and your colours and the variation and the transition between one colour and another is so delicate, and that's what gives you that realistic look. So I'll talk you through this and I'll share with you my findings of doing this piece, in the hope that that information will help. I always say to my students, when you first embark on a portrait, make sure that you get everything in the right place. So spend that time really working on your foundations being the actual structure, and getting everything in place and making sure that your proportions are pretty spot on. If you can get your proportions right and you can get all your references in the correct position, the right place, then you're making things so much easier for yourself as you progress through this, and you'll save yourself a lot of frustration. So I'm going to start playing this video now, and I'll talk you through it. So just now I've obviously put in some of the basic information. His face is looking a little bit muddy, so I'm going over with some warm tones, and I'm adding some warm tones. I'm correcting the chin area and up the side of the cheek, and then eventually adding in the ear. Now you'll see the brush and the pencil flicking across the page every now and again. That's just me making sure that I get the position of the ear correct and the proportion of the ear and with reference to the rest of the face correct. So it's quite rough just now. I'm just putting things in place. It doesn't look anything like an ear at the moment, but that's how it goes. That's the nature of it. So I'm just really kind of trying to get everything in place, tidy up the side of the face a little bit, sort out the neck a little bit, and get all those bits of information tidied up and put in place. And then I'll go across the whole face, just brightening it up. And the colours that I'm using is a yellow ochre and also a sand colour, which sand is like an off-white. It's just a warmer white. It's fantastic. It stops you from using white. If you use the sand, it's a good way to stop you from going too bright with your highlights as well. And another yellow, I forget the name of it now. And I'm going into the bottom of the nose now. I'm being quite obvious with my deep tones just now, but that's what I tend to do. I tend to be quite obvious about some bits of information I put in, then I go over it and I work over it again. This is what they call, the term layering. So again, I'm always going over those highlighted areas across the top of the cheek and the bridge of the nose so that I don't lose them. So you'll see throughout the video that I'm continuously just checking those highlights and keeping them brighter than the rest of the face, because they are right across the middle of the face, the obvious areas of the face that are hit by the light. Now at the moment it still looks very much like a boy and not so much a baby boy, but as the video progresses you do see it coming through. There's a lot more information required to go in. At this point I'm really just playing around with some of the colours, getting some of the colours in place and putting the rest of the information in place, working into the hair, and constantly always going back and just making sure that I've got these highlights in place and that I don't lose them. Now what I don't realise at this point in time is the eye on the left is slightly out of proportion, and I do pick up on this later on in the video, and you will see it is quite obvious. I do alter the proportion of the eye slightly, and when I say slightly it is just slight changes. And the lips as well, to the right hand side of the lips there's a slight alteration required on that too, and that's enough just to bring it back and make it look like the reference photo. So again, going over the highlights on the bridge of the nose up onto the forehead. Although the forehead's quite bright, there is that tiny variation between across the cheeks and the forehead, so the forehead's still that little bit tone lower than the highlight across the cheeks. And then into the chin, working on some of the shadows in the chin, trying not to go too deep because this is a baby face, so although there's shadows, they are very delicate shadows and they're not deep. If you made those shadows really deep, you would make this face look a lot older again. So again, I'm working into the background and I'm filling my canvas up now, just preparing myself for the next layer where I start putting in a little bit more information. So I'm filling that canvas up and blocking it in with colour. And you'll see me actually go back in and start working into the hair area, where I'll put a little bit more information into the hair. Here we go just now. Now what's happening is, you might look at this and go, what on earth, there's black lines everywhere. I take what I class as key pieces of information. So if there's obvious curls in his hair, I will put those in place. So all these key pieces of information I will put in place, make sure I get the size correct and make sure I get the position correct. And if you do this, you can then work around those key areas, and that's what gets it looking more like the original reference. So again, I'm just putting in those dark, obvious areas of the hair and popping them in place. So it looks really rough at the moment, but this is me preparing to go to the next layer. I'll go back over the hair again and I'll start darkening in the areas that are a lot deeper, and that just lets you see how it's going to build up. This is what they mean by working in layers sort of thing. Now, one of the mistakes I did make with the hair, and you'll see this later on in the video, is that I made the highlights just a bit too bright, and I made them a bit too cool as well, so that there was more blue, whereas the highlights of the original reference, there was a little bit more yellow in it. There were slightly warmer highlights and they were a heck of a lot more subtle than what I originally made mine. So at the very end of the video, I ended up bringing those highlights down, and I put a bit of it was yellow, ochre and black mix, and I put a bit of a kind of transparent wash over the whole hair area, which just changed it completely. So I'm working into the eyes a little bit more at this point. I've added in the eyelashes and things. You can see now he's looking more like a human kind of form, but again, still not baby enough. And this is where I realised that even going over the highlights and things, that I had gone wrong somewhere. So I'd analysed it and realised that the left eye needed altered slightly, the right hand side of the mouth needed altered slightly, and then as I progressed I realised that the area below the brow, so above the eye, below the brow, was a lot deeper than I had made it. And once I made those areas deeper and I changed the tonal values of those areas, that's when the baby features really came through. So he is looking younger now, and he's looking a lot more human-like now, and all the colours and the variations are blending quite nicely, and you're getting that lovely glow on the skin And the warmer tones, you'll see that I've gone over the warmer tones. He's not looking so yellow now, he's looking more human-like. And this is what I mean, you just have to continuously work over your layers and just like tread with caution when you get to this stage. Now you will see, and I will try and stop the video at the point where you see the eye change and just explain to you exactly what happened with the eye. So just always going back into the highlighted areas, and just wherever I lift them, I'll check the rest of the face and see if there's any areas in the face that are the same kind of tone, and I'll pop it in. So the chin being that little bit prominent is getting the reflection of the light quite a bit as well. So I'm just working in the chin and trying to keep that quite bright so that you get the information there. The changes in the colours are so subtle, so subtle. I made a big mistake here, and the highlights above the eyes, I made them too bright, and it's an easy mistake to make, but I did go back in later on in the video and bring those down and make them slightly lower in value, which really made them look more like a baby. So here we go, I'm just working in the background again, darkening it up, and that's brought his face forward, which is lovely for a portrait. Now I'm going to just pause this. Yeah, so on this particular part you can see that the left hand eye has changed. Now if I use my little pointer here, this area here has been brought down slightly, which has made this area larger, but in relation to this eye, this is correct. Before it was slightly higher, this area didn't come down low enough, and when I mean about reference points, it's like when you're looking at your reference image, areas like this where the little fold of the skin comes down and where there's an obvious change in direction, see that point there? That's an important reference point, and if you take a line across to see where that's hitting, that will then let you know if you've got it in the right place or not. Now I had it in the wrong place and it was slightly higher and it was hitting the corner here, and it needed to come down, and when I say it needed to come down, it needed to come down the tiniest little bit so that it was hitting just below this the iris area, and that's what I'm talking about. It's these tiny changes that will make all the difference to your portrait, so watch out for those things. Now it looks a little bit funky just now because I've completely gone back in and changed that eye, but as it progresses, the eye softens up again and things fall into place. The mouth as well, if I can show you here, where I had the mouth coming in, it was just reaching the fold of the nose and it just wasn't out far enough. It needed to come out so it was in kind of line with this part here coming down, so that's exactly what I did, and that again, it's the tiniest changes, but they make such a massive difference to your portrait. Okay, I'll just play this a little bit again. Now, I'm just going to stop it here and show you that image there is exactly the same as the image that was previous that you've just seen, except it was taken outside. So that's another tip that I would give you, is if you are going to take progress photos of your work, just bear in mind the light in which you take those photographs in, because they can throw you a little bit with your colours as well. So when you look at this image, which was taken outside in a nice daylight, not sunny, not too dull, just a base daylight, the colours are a lot more brighter and whiter looking than the previous image. So if I just go back and just let you see there, now it's exactly the same, there's been no changes, but they've just been, one was taken inside and one was taken outside, so bear that in mind as well when you're taking reference photos of your progress. Okay, and I'll stop at that one. So here I've worked into the eyes a little bit and I've blended the face a little bit and sorted that eye, and it's now beginning to just fall in nicely, but they still don't have that baby feature. He's younger and he looks younger, but he doesn't have the babiness in him. Now when I analysed this, I was trying to think, I thought, right, I've got everything in place, I've got everything in proportion, my shadows are pretty good, The highlights in the hair are a bit too bright, so I need to bring those down and warm them up a little bit. And then when I looked again, I thought, you know, below the brow is too bright, way too bright. There's no area below the brow that's as bright as the area across the cheeks or across the forehead. And I thought, right, I need to tone that down. And you will see the difference by changing the highlights in the hair and toning down just above the eye below the brow. It really did bring that babiness out, and it was a massive change. The tiniest alterations that make such a huge difference to your portrait. And this is how you will get the baby features in your portrait. This is how you will be able to bring your portrait looking from maybe slightly older than it is to looking how it should be. These frustrations, you're not alone with them. We've all gone through them. But if you know what areas to look out for and you know how to pull it back, it makes all the difference. So I'm going to just press play and let this go on to the next clip. There you are. So, in taking that area above the eye, below the brow, and just bringing the tones down slightly now, they could do with coming down just that little bit more, but just bringing them down that little bit slightly has really made his baby features come through. He looks so much younger now. And again, in the hair, he actually looks like he has black hair now that's getting hit with the light, as opposed to looking like he had grey hair. So those tiny little changes have made a massive difference to this portrait, and that's the kind of things that you want to look out for when you're doing a portrait, especially if it's a portrait of a young person. It's all in the tonal values and that blend and that transition between one colour and another. It's so delicate, but it makes such a difference. And again, just to warm up those highlights up here and just put a slightly more warmth into them has made them look better. Now across here again, it could do with a little bit more work, and once those kind of highlights are worked in just a little bit and just blended that a little bit more, and the eyes are darkened just that tiny little bit more, then it really is going to look absolutely superb. But yeah, that's what to look out for when you're doing a baby portrait. I hope that some of the information that I've shared with you in this video helps you, and if you have found it helpful, please do subscribe for more, and share. That would be great. Okay, thanks. Bye.